Hey, what is up? Welcome back to Retro Gaming Rewind Podcast with Sean, where we talk everything old games. Everything that's a blast from the past. And today I have something very special because today on this podcast, we're going to be talking about my 10 out of 10 retro games. That's right, I've talked about 10 out of 10 games before on previous and other shows of mine. But today we're going to be talking about retro 10 out of 10 games that I think stand the test of time. What classic retro games earn that 10 out of 10 spot? We're going to talk about them. I got a list. We're going to go down the list. This is my personal list. Now, there's lots more. Trust me. I could keep going. But I narrowed it down to this list. I want you guys to chime in. I want you guys to chime in the comments because I want you to put your list down, or at least, what game do you think retro game is a 10 out of 10? Because, a lot of people are funny about giving that score because it's a perfect score, right? Well, hey, listen, there's a lot of great games out there. And even today, there's some great masterpieces coming out. But I think when we look back at some of these retro games, these are going to be talked about for years and years. Our kids will be playing them, their kids, and even to this day, they still look great. They still play great. We're still talking about them. And that's why I think they're 10 out of 10s. Let's get right into this list. Super Mario Brothers 3. Yeah. I can't talk about that game enough on this channel. We're going to actually be playing that on my Retro with the King gameplay series. What an amazing, amazing game. It never gets old. It still looks great. And I think, even to this day, with the newer Mario games, I still think it's one of the best platformers, but I also think it's one of the best Mario games. I really do. Super Mario Brothers 3. I'll never forget when I first saw that playing on the NES. My father actually had what they call a conversion van. He was one of the first to have one. It had a TV built in it. It had an entertainment center. It was almost like a camper. It had running lights. You sat down. It had a bed that came down. And we were one of the first to have an actual TV that came down in the van. And it had an NES hooked up to it. And that was like unbelievable. You would sit in the back while we were taking trips and you could play NES. And we had Super Mario Brothers 3 running in the van, and it was like, we would pull over and people would come and look and they would think we were famous. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable for the time, We had the VHS player, and we had the big blocky phone. That was a car phone back then, but then we had the NES, and I think I had Tetris in there. I think I had Narc, if you remember that game. Donkey Kong, Final Fantasy, but I had Super Mario Brothers 3. Zelda, A Link to the Past, another game that I mention all the time on this channel, and it's with reason. I played it on this channel. I don't know how many copies I own of it, but it's just, I have to buy it when I see it. It's something that really holds heart to me, and I just love it, and it's just a classic, and it's a straight 10 out of 10. One of the greatest games ever made. I truthfully believe that in my life. I've had people play that game that weren't even into video games, and it was a masterpiece for its time, well ahead of its time, and still talk about it to this day. Myst. I was a PC kid. I would build PCs back in the day. Even before the console days, I was a PC kid. And when the CD-ROM first came out, Myst was in my CD-ROM. I remember it was Myst, The Seventh Guest, King's Quest, Police Quest, and Leisure Suit Larry. Ha! And people that played PC back in the day know what I'm talking about. That's what we played. I mean, I had Doom, I had Unreal Tournament, I had Quake, I had all them. But this was on CD-ROM, and Myst was a masterpiece puzzle game. It had one of the first to have like QuickTime movies. You would sit, you would watch it. It had audio. It had actual QuickTime movie events. The game was like fully rendered, still images, but you would click. Things would animate, rotate, and for its time, it was today you would look at it and you would laugh, but not at its time you wouldn't. Myst was, and I remember I had a PC that couldn't even run it. I actually had to upgrade my PC to run Myst. And I had a slower CD-ROM drive that couldn't keep up with it. Back then, you had CD-ROM drives that went by the speed. You had 2x, 4x, 8x. That's how it was back then. But I had another game, too, on CD-ROM called Phantasmagoria. I was a big Sierra guy. I had all the Sierra games. Shivers, the Black Dahlia. I remember Dennis Hopper was in that game. But Myst was number one. Riven. Then you had Exile. Super Street Fighter II Turbo. One of the greatest fighting games ever made to this day. And I was also an arcade kid. And that was the arcade game that we played down the shore. That was the arcade game that when you went into the arcade, you played that game. That was a masterpiece game. That and the next game I'm going to talk about. Mortal Kombat 2. Another 10 out of 10. Another arcade game. I was an arcade kid. When I went into the arcades, there was two cabinets I would play. Mortal Kombat 2 and Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. And when that came out for the home console, that was... I remember I was renting them first from a rental store down the street here. But when I owned them, I don't think I ever left the television. Because I would wait to go down the shore to play it at various arcades. And, back then, that was what multiplayer was. You would wait to see the guy that was like the master, and you would play him. And then if you beat him, you would be the king of the arcade, and people would line up to play you. And that's how it was back then. It wasn't like how it was now where you play people online. There was no such thing as lag. You played people right next to you, and people would come from around the world. And it was just a great time to be alive. A lot different than it is now. Super Mario World. I talked about Super Mario Brothers 3. If there was a close second, it would be Super Mario World on the NES, Super NES, SNES. I remember when that game came out, my cousins came over, my friends came over, and that was really an amazing game. It was the graphics were stunning because it was the Super NES. You had come from 8-bit to 16-bit, and that game just looked great. That game looks so good on the TV. It still looks good. It was a very, very colorful, joyful game. You had Yoshi. Yoshi! It was a great game, and it was one of my favorites. Sonic the Hedgehog. I've talked about that before. I've talked about Sonic the Hedgehog. I'll never forget going to my grandmother's house in Florida. She had Sonic the Hedgehog, and it just blew my mind. I became a Sonic the Hedgehog. I became a Genesis kid, basically, from the Nintendo era. I saw Sonic, and I fell in love with him. Twisted Metal, one of my favorite games growing up on the PlayStation 1. Twisted Metal just blew my mind what that game could do. It was so ahead of its time. Probably the most I've ever spent in a game growing up was Twisted Metal. I burnt those discs out. Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast. I loved that game. To this day, I think that game blows anything away for the time being as far as the graphics. I think the Dreamcast was so short-lived, and I think the Dreamcast was such an amazing, powerful system. I absolutely love the Dreamcast. It's one of my favorite retro systems, and to this day, I still play the Dreamcast. Resident Evil 1 on this PlayStation, another one of my favorite games. I absolutely loved Resident Evil. For its time, with the CG, with the movie cutscenes, quick time cutscenes, and the visuals, that game, I still have a blast playing that today. The original. I'm not talking about the reboots. I'm talking about the original. You can even play it, I think, you can play it on the PlayStation Classic, but Resident Evil, Director's Cut, whatever you want to call it, it don't get much better than that. It's where it all started, baby. Resident Evil 1. I think it's still the best. NBA Jam, probably the most addictive game ever made. Sorry, it is. Probably the greatest sports game ever made. NBA Jam is a classic. It needs to come back. They need to bring that game back on the Switch. They did bring it back on the Wii. It was great. They need to bring it back on the Switch. A whole brand new reboot. Luigi's Mansion, the original on the GameCube. I'll never forget when the GameCube first came out and I saw that playing on it. I said, that's it. I got to get a GameCube. Luigi's Mansion is one of my all-time favorite games. It's the newer Luigi's Mansions are great too, but nothing can beat the original. And they redid the original also on the 3DS. Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2 on the Super NES. Excellent platformers. One of the best platformers ever made, in my opinion. Very hard, very good. Excellent looking game for its time. Asteroids on the Atari. No-brainer, classic. Tetris. One of the best addicting games ever made. Classic, no-brainer. And Super Mario Kart on the SNES. Still one of my favorite racers and still one of my favorite Mario Karts. I've always said this. I played it recently on my Retro series, my Retro with the King. I just love that game. It's fun. And it's where it all started, in my opinion. Those are just some of my 10 out of 10 retro games. Again, I want to hear from you. I want to know what your 10 out of 10 retro games are. Leave a comment down below. I'm really interested to know what they are. And I will be seeing you again on the next episode of Retro Gaming Rewind with Sean. Again, leave some comments. I love to hear from you guys. I know you guys have some 10 out of 10s that you would love to share. Any of the ones that I shared are the same, or do you guys have any other ones that are, personal to you? Or something that really hit you growing up, that's near and dear to you that you would like to share, that's a 10 out of 10. I would love to hear it. Don't forget, I have more also that are 10 out of 10s that I didn't list on here. So, again, we may agree, and I definitely would like to hear from you. And also, you may bring up one that I didn't even remember to write down. I play so many games through the years. So definitely chime in. I'd love to hear from you. Take care, everybody. Until the next episode, be safe, be well. I'll be seeing you.